Hi, and welcome to the Assistive Listening Device Training. I'm Dr. Jill Townsend. I'm the Educational Audiologist for the Metro Regional Program. We're going to go through a few things during this training on why and who needs an assistive listening device, as well as the different components of the systems that you might see, and some care tips and how to get a hold of me in the future if we run into any issues with your students' equipment. There are three major factors that degrade the signal-to-noise ratio and therefore can affect the quality of the speech signal. They are background noise, reverberation, which is how the sound bounces off of different objects or walls, and distance. That would be the distance from the speaker to the listener. As we all know, classrooms are very noisy. You may have multiple people talking at the same time, as well as causing a lot of noise in the room just with desk chairs moving or toys or anything like that, depending on the age group. And you may have a student that has a hearing loss, and you're trying to get that student's attention with all of that noise going on. It's hard to do, and that is where a assistive listening device would help, so that you can hear the teacher, so the student can hear the teacher speaking above all that noise. So that noise can affect all children, let alone even more problems for a student with a hearing impairment. Assistive listening devices would benefit majority of children, but as far as those that have a hearing loss, it can affect them much more. There was a study that was done, this is back from 1996, and statistics haven't changed much, but normal hearing children and adults were done in this study. And as you can see, when the study was done, the word recognition up close, so that's just understanding the words in quiet. The younger they were at 4 years, they understood 88%. 5 years old, 94%. 6 years, 98%. And adult understood 99.3%, which is pretty good. But even at 4 years old, up close, they still had a little trouble understanding. And that is normal hearing students, or I should say subjects. With the word recognition with distance and noise, you can see that it dramatically changed from 4 years to 60. They went down to 67%, 5 years, 84%, 6 years, 86%. Adult didn't change that much. But the main thing is that you see that big jump in a change due to their language development, still learning speech. So having that noise and distance, even with normal hearing, can cause quite an impact on a student. Now, add a hearing loss, that makes it even more difficult, and that is where the assistive listening device would help. That helps to overcome those boundaries. A lot of times you'll hear, oh, I have a student that has a cochlear implant, now they can hear normal, they should be fine too. As we know from that slide above, they definitely need to also have an assistive listening device, because that competing noise can cause interference for them. So an FM or DM for anyone with a cochlear implant, with hearing aids, with a unilateral hearing loss, meaning in just one ear, or a BAHA, which is the bone-anchored hearing aid, they all would benefit from an assistive listening device. Just kind of a key thing, your listening range is around 3 to 4 feet. So kind of think of a hula hoop as you put your arms out. The further you get away from your arm's length, the more difficult that student or that person will be able to hear you, just because of how the sound, there's that distance from the speaker. What is a DM or Rogers system? It has a couple different components. You have the transmitter, which is what the teacher wears, or otherwise known as the microphone. The receiver, or the accessory, so that on this picture here, you can see it's on the hearing aid, there's a little receiver. And then the wireless transmission between the two. So the teacher's talking into the microphone, and it goes straight to that receiver into that student's hearing aid or hearing device. How does the system work? The talker speaks into the transmitter, and that speaker's voice is transmitted to the receiver in the hearing aid, or CI, cochlear implant, or the BAHA, and then that, which is connected to the hearing device, and that delivers that sound to that hearing instrument. There are multiple different transmitters that you may see. Kind of depends on what kind of hearing device the student has. You may see a Roger touchscreen, a Roger Inspiro, a Connect clip, or a multi-mic. It really just depends on what that student has. Majority will have probably the Roger touchscreen, but if not, it's because it isn't compatible with the type of hearing aid or hearing device that student has. Another thing to keep in mind is the operating range in clear line of sight ranges from 65 to 80 feet. So that's always important too. The further away that you are, you may lose that connection. And also know that that's pretty good distance too, that it's important to know that you may still be broadcasting your voice to that student even when they're further away from you. And in the other trainings that we have after this slideshow, you'll be able to see how to mute your transmitter and other functions that they may have. The proper way to wear the transmitters with the Roger touchscreen, you can see how they're worn here. And then the Roger Inspiro, Connect clip, and the multi-mic. With all of them, you're going to want to be in the center collarbone height. And that way, with the microphone will be able to pick up your voice. There are different receiver styles. You have a universal receiver that attaches to a hearing aid. It's this little silver piece. It needs to have a special audio chute connected to their hearing aid. There's a Roger 17. This is actually a cochlear implant. It slides onto the bottom. There's another universal receiver that has a little plastic shoe and then has the receiver. There's a Roger 20. This is used for a cochlear implant, and it's this little black piece here. There may be there's a lot of hearing aids now that are coming out that don't have to have any kind of piece attached to it. It's all internal. It just needs me to come out and install it if it hasn't been already. But then there's nothing extra that needs to go onto that student's hearing aid. And then there's a Roger Focus, which is not a hearing aid. It's actually more for a unilateral hearing loss. It actually goes into the good ear and just transmits the voice straight to their ear, to their good ear. It does not amplify or anything. It is not a hearing aid. You'll see this more often with those with a very, very slight hearing loss, or for sure when they have a unilateral hearing loss. There are some possible accessories that you might find in your basket that you have. A multi-mic. If it's not used alone, it is this little black piece, and then it would have a receiver attached to the bottom, and you'd use that in conjunction with one of these transmitters. You have your Oticon streamer. It's the same idea. It's going to be plugged in the bottom. The silver piece is plugged in down here. And an FM DEX. It's actually inside. Usually you'll see it like this, but it's hidden inside. All of these that you see here have to be used in conjunction with one of these, or I should say one of these two transmitters. The keys to successful FM Roger operation: you need to make sure the transmitter and the receiver are on the same channel if you're using FM, or you have to make sure that they're synced to the receiver. And that is done by placing the device right next to the receiver when it's attached to the hearing aid or hearing device and hitting the connect button. And once again, some of these will be shown in the videos that relate to your individual student's equipment. Accessories must also be paired if you're using Bluetooth. Transmitter and accessories must be charged, and the receiver must be powered, usually by the hearing instrument or the cochlear implant. So you may have a hearing aid and it runs off of the battery of that hearing aid when you plug the receiver into it. And must be within operating range, as we said, 65 to 80 feet, depending on the device, and in a clear line of sight. There are some daily routines that the hearing instruments need to go through. They're required under Rule 51. You need to be checking the visual inspection to check to see if the ear mold isn't blocked or if the tubing isn't cut or cracked, or check for any moisture in the tubing. A listening check: you need to listen to the hearing instrument. turn on the transmitter and make sure that they're receiving that FM Rogers signal. So you want to make sure that the hearing aid is working properly. And when you know that's working, then you also want to make sure that that actual transmission of the Roger or the assistive listening device is working as well. If there's no sound from the hearing aid or the assistive listening device, key is check the battery first. Next is clean the ear mold, and then making sure that device is synced or on the correct channel. And there are specific troubleshooting guidelines in the basket with your students' equipment. There are some care tips. Each assistive listening device, your student should have a basket with a gray case for the transmitter, and then a small case to store the receiver if your student has a receiver. That is where it should be stored when it's not being used. You should also have supply of extra batteries if your students' hearing devices run off of batteries, and a battery tester is included. However, sometimes just keep in mind that battery tester may not be the most reliable, just because the battery can say that it's good and it's good enough to power the hearing aid, but it may not be good enough to power both the hearing aid and the receiver, since it draws more juice when you're doing both. So when in doubt, change those batteries. And if you're having any trouble and when you get low, you need to contact me. One thing to remember too is to wait 3 to 5 minutes after removing the battery sticker. This ensures that you get the full activation of that battery. You want to keep your assistive listening device away from water, and because they can cause serious damage. Try to keep it out of sunlight and try not to drop it onto a hard surface. There are little bumpers on some of them, but they seem to fall off too. So just making sure that you handle it with care. With Rule 51, you can check, you are required to check your student's equipment to make sure that it's working properly, and that a Ling 6 sound check can be administered. And you want to record that those things have been done to make sure that the hearing device and FM, or I should say DM devices, are working properly. And you'll be making a daily check on the hearing aid log. And those logs can be found in your student's basket. And they look like this. So you just find the date, you do your Ling 6, or make sure that the hearing aid's working properly and that you have a good transmission between the two, and just make a check mark. If it's not working and you need assistance, there's a little key down here of what you need to do, or if a student's saying they don't want to use it, there's different things that you can mark so that they know, so that it's covered for you, to make sure that you can prove that you're doing what you need to be doing. It also keeps me in check too, so that if you have some issues and you've contacted me, you can say, hey, I told Jill that something was wrong on November 6th and she didn't come out till December 6th. That is my issue, not yours. And by the way, that will not happen. I usually respond within that same day, or at least the next day. If you don't know what a Ling 6 sound check is, it's a behavioral listening check to determine if the hearing device is working properly. And it consists of 6 sounds: ah, ee, oo, sh, s, and it encompasses all those frequency range of all the phonemes. So you might have them repeat those sounds, say words with those sounds, and then that way you know that hearing device is working properly. If it's not, and they don't hear the sh sound or the s sound, that could mean could be something wrong with the hearing device. So it's just something to try to do and see, and then make a note if they're not hearing certain sounds, and that's something that might need to be addressed with either me, if I can. If it ends up being something wrong with the hearing device, then their medical audiologist would have to check on their device to make sure it's still working properly. You can perform that test either listening to the device yourself or having the students repeat those sounds. And then you mark it on that check sheet that you looked at right here, that it was done. I have some helpful requests for me. If there is a change in your student's hearing device, if you could let me know as soon as possible so that I can make sure that they have the correct equipment. Sometimes if they get majority of the times if they get a whole new piece of equipment or a new hearing device, the audio shoe is different, or something is different that I would need to make sure you have the right equipment there. If you do obtain an updated audiogram, if you could send me a copy, that helps me to make sure that I'm offering the best accommodations for the student. And also just keep in mind that I'm not able to attend IEP meetings due to my caseload. But when you do set up an IEP, if you want to let me know, that would be great. That way, if I have any concerns, I can send any suggestions, or if anything comes up during that IEP, so that you know that you can contact me and I can answer as well as I can on any of those questions that might come up. And probably another one is if you have a student that doesn't use their equipment very often, and you find that it's just sitting there in a room not being used, depending on if this is okay with parents and obviously with the team, if you find that they are not using it, but you want to still keep the equipment on their IEP, but maybe as needed, if you could change the wording to FMDM equipment available upon request, that would help me so that I could come and pick up the equipment. But if something would change for that student down the road, it's still on their IEP, you just holler and I bring it right back out. But that helps so that equipment isn't just sitting there and can be used for other students that would be using it. Troubleshooting of equipment. There is a checklist included in the student's basket. I'd like you to try to do some of those troubleshooting options before contacting me, because sometimes it's a quick little easy thing and you're not waiting for me to come out and fix it if it's something that can be fixed right away. If you do have issues and you've gone through that troubleshooting and you're still having trouble, if you could use the website, the NebraskaMRP.com. When you go to that website, there's an audiology services tab on the left-hand side. You'd then click audiological assistance or audiology troubleshooting for more troubleshooting help. If you do the assistance, that's going to take you to a Google form, and it's going to give you a bunch of things to fill out that help me so I know where I need to go. And it really helps me, instead of an email, to use that site, because it puts it in one spot and I get an alert, and then I might even be close to your school that I could stop by and get it fixed right away. Sometimes with an email, I get a lot of emails that I may miss one and I don't want to miss it, especially if they're having some trouble with their equipment. I'd want to get it fixed right away. In closing, I want to make sure that you share this with your students, teachers, or paraprofessionals, or anybody that you would think would help the students' academic success. Anybody that would be helping to get the students set up, or just important for them a teacher to understand the importance of why to use the device. Some of the other videos that you'll see within this training are different scenarios of how it sounds. And sometimes that helps for teachers to hear. They might think they hear just fine, but until they can actually hear it themselves, those videos really are beneficial. So even if it's just picking out some of those videos and having them watch is very beneficial. And you can have them go through this training that you are, or there are ways to, on my website that I mentioned above, the NebraskaMRP.com, you can access those videos separately and just show them those without having to go through the whole presentation. If there are anybody that needs additional training, we'd rather have hands-on with me coming there, please let me know. You can email me and we can try to set up a time. It'll be a lot easier to go through that kind of training when we actually have the students' equipment there, their actual hearing device. So if we could set up a time once school starts, go through the training yourself. But as far as if you need a little bit more, it's probably more beneficial to have all the equipment there with the student, so that then that can answer any questions. So I hope that you enjoyed this training. Please let me know if you have any questions. And I hope you all have a great year, and I'm sure I'll see you soon. Thanks a lot.